Everybody, welcome back. That was quite a conversation. I didn't know it was going to take that turn. I didn't know Mickey was into Carl Jung and all that stuff. But
that was fantastic.
We have our new guest, Haz Aldin. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. He's a self-described Marxist-Leninist and patriotic socialist. He's based in Detroit, Michigan. He's the founder of the media collective Infrared, which airs on YouTube and Twitch and features live debates, commentary, and current events and discussions on politics, philosophy, and culture. Please welcome to the show, Haz. Hey, Haz, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Now, you tweeted this out. So this is why I have you on. So you tweeted this out. You say, what if I told you that everything you're taught about this man, meaning Kim Jong-un, and his country is propaganda? What if I told you that North Korea is vilified because it is one of the only countries in East Asia which refuses to be enslaved by international banksters? What if I told you that all its troubles were the result of an extremely harsh sanctions imposed by the U.S. regime? What if I told you that people in North Korea are in general happier than in the South? No homeless, no organized crime, no prostitution or pornography, no unemployment, and abundant housing for all. Sure, they don't have as much access to consume goods, but what they have is dignity and freedom. Freedom from being enslaved by foreigners and banksters. Their land, people, and culture is free from the filth and poison of today's Western societies, and they are better off for it. Do you really think the media has been telling you the truth about North Korea? Well, that's interesting. So now, since I started this show, I've lived through a lot of hoaxes perpetrated by the mass media and the establishment. The first one was Russiagate. Second one was the Syria gas attacks in the Syria war. It was the Libya war. It was the Ukraine war. It was COVID. I mean, it's unbelievable how we are the most propagandized people in the world in the United States, and they don't know it. They have no idea they're being propagandized. They think that Sean Hannity, Anderson Cooper, and Rachel Maddow are telling them the truth. They think the New York Times and the Washington Post, owned by the richest handful of billionaires in the world, are somehow giving you the real truth about their class and their plans. They're not. So when I read that, I was like, I could believe that. So tell me, what do you base this on? Have you been to Korea, and how do you know this?
I haven't myself been yet. I think I plan on going soon, but I have colleagues and friends who have gone, who are very knowledgeable on the topic, who have spoken to people there. But the main thing that I base it on is that when you actually do the research for yourself, when you investigate all of these ludicrous claims they make about North Korea, everything, all these ridiculous claims made by that woman, Yeonmi Park or whatever, all of these other kinds of tabloid stories, you go and find the primary sources, and it almost always comes down to the extremely contradictory, extremely inconsistent narratives and stories told by defectors, all of whom seem to contradict each other. And then why is this? Why are defectors coming from the North telling all these wacky, bizarre stories about what's going on there? Well, you actually study and investigate it, and it turns out there's a financial incentive. They're being financially incentivized to make these ridiculous claims because they get more attention for it, because they get paid for it, and so on. So I mean, you got to ask the question, why is there such a market for these ridiculous, insane claims that are made about North Korea, about how nobody's allowed to get the same haircut as Kim Jong-un and all this other nonsense? Why are we consistently told and depicted, that this is an insane kind of crazy country? It's totally 1984, totally Orwellian. It's a surreal country, and so on. Well, I would answer that by saying that is a country which, in the eyes of the U.S. and which in the eyes of NATO and the U.S. empire, basically, isn't supposed to exist. And we can go deep into the history of it, starting from the Korean War. But the whole context was when the Koreans liberated themselves from the Japanese, the Soviets and the Americans agreed that they would occupy different parts of Korea. Now, on the Soviet side of things, the Soviets packed up their things and left because they were requested to, whereas the U.S. would not let go of their occupation, and they helped put down several rebellions in the South, actually, which didn't want the U.S. to be there, and also didn't want the U.S.-backed dictator to rule South Korea, to rule Korea. So, and then through 3,000 border provocations, before the 1950 June 25th date, which is what we think the start of the Korean War is, it's only after so much was done to attack on the border, so much was done to undermine the sovereignty of the Korean people, that the North Korea proper that's in our textbooks begins. And that war was never, not a lot of people know this, it wasn't ever resolved. So formally speaking, the Koreas are still at war, and in a sense, we're still at war with the DPRK. So it's not supposed to exist, basically. It's a society that's not supposed to exist.
Why is North Korea at war with South Korea?
Because neither of them recognizes the other. They both lay claim to a unified Korea, especially the North, especially the DPRK. They consider the South, and I think this is fair, to be an illegitimate state because of its historical origins. Because again, it was a military dictatorship backed by U.S. occupation forces, which had to slaughter tens of thousands of people in the beginning in order to maintain its iron grip. And actually, South Korea was a dictatorship for most of its history. It was only very recently, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the late 70s or the early 80s that South Korea became a so-called democracy and its dictatorship ended.
So people always, first of all, people say that North Koreans aren't allowed to leave their country, and the ones that are allowed to leave, they have to leave some of their family behind, so their incentive is to come back. Is that true, and why is that?
It's not true. It's actually enshrined in their constitution. I mean, maybe you don't believe the legitimacy of that they do have the right to go abroad for work and for other kinds of things. Yeah, sorry.
Are they allowed to just freely leave, or do they have to have a specific reason to leave the country?
Of course, they have to have a reason. And I think that's actually how it works in any country. Because when you think about it, if you want to leave by just leaving on your own 2 feet, I don't really think there's going to be a great deal that's going to be in your way. What actually happens when it comes to defectors and people leaving illegally, or legally for that matter, is it's always organized on a social level. It's always organized through what connections you have. Who's actually transporting you across the border? Who's actually taking you there? Who's arranging the trip? And so on and so on. So if that is being arranged by the government, of course, the government, there has to be a valid reason for it. You can't go, for example, the worry is that you're going to go and leak intelligence to the enemy, because this is still on Google. You search, it's in 2017, and get this, they posted $860,000, the South Korean government, for anyone from the North, anyone from the DPRK to defect, who will share important intelligence that will help the security of the South. So they're bribing people with $1 million to cross to basically share intelligence secrets, state secrets that could endanger the security, the DPRK. So this is their main worry. Their main worry is not really just people who, decide that they want to fully cut themselves off from their families, from their village, from their communal upbringing, and just go on their own and leave. That's not really the problem. The problem is that the border itself is heavily militarized in both directions, and there's always the possibility that if someone is leaving and you don't know why they're leaving, and there's no reason that's being given, and it's being done illegitimately, that it could be done for the purposes of undermining the security.
So if I wanted to leave the United States and I wanted to go to Mexico or Europe or Antarctica, the government doesn't stop me.
You're right, but there's a crucial difference. The crucial difference is that we basically control the entire world. We're not under siege by everywhere in the world, and the whole world isn't at war with us, and our existence on the international scene is not some kind of, scandal and something that has to be maintained through. I mean, imagine in 1776, we have our revolution, we overthrow the British, and yet we are constantly, not just in 1812, but constantly, every month, every year, constantly, there's so many plots, so many attempts to basically destroy our efforts to liberate ourselves from colonialism, to the point where we have to start getting, there has to be a permanent state of heightened vigilance on our part, just to defend, the ability to say, hey, we don't want the British troops to come and occupy our country. So I am far from saying that I think that the DPRK is a totally loose, lax society where there's, no level of heightened or extraordinary extreme vigilance or anything like that. They are, but I think understanding their circumstances, it's understandable. They are literally under siege. And, we have not a day has gone by where we've just left them alone. If we were willing to leave them alone, why do we have to sanction them to the point where they are cut off from the most basic food, medical, industrial, and so on supplies? Like, if you do business in the DPRK and get caught, you are cut off from the entire US-led global financial system completely. And it's like, I hope that with the rise of BRICS and with the rise of de-dollarization, the things will change considerably. But they are in a very tough spot, and I really think that their ability to maintain what they have and maintain a functional society with a primary, industrial base, provided primary standard of living for its people, I think that's very impressive given the circumstances.
So you wouldn't deny that North Korea is what we would consider a totalitarian regime, run in a totalitarian way, correct?
I don't think there could ever be such a thing. I mean, I find this strange narrative that we often tell about the so-called rogue states. On the one hand, these are completely omnipotent governments that have absolute total control over every aspect of everyone's lives, and there's nothing limiting their power whatsoever. And on the other hand, they're grossly incompetent. They can't even function or get anything done. They have no technology, and they're basically a backwater, completely incohesive, completely corrupt, basically shithole, excuse my French. I find this to be a contradictory narrative that we're told. And the truth is that North Korea, the DPRK, in line with how Asian culture just seems to be in general, is a highly collectivistic society. So the totalitarianism, it's not, quote unquote, the level of, how much the major decisions about life are happening at collective and communal levels. That's not from the top down of, one guy or the government having total control. That's more like you're born in a village, and that, your village community at the most local possible of levels, your culture itself is reinforcing a level of collectivism and social solidarity that it's just implicit for them. If there was such an extraordinary degree of force and direct coercion to basically meddle in people's lives in a way that they found to be unnatural and incompatible with their common sense, I mean, North Korea would have to be greatly more technologically advanced and greatly more kind of powerful as a state than what we claim it is already, right? We say the opposite. So I think a lot of that really just comes down to cultural differences, and combined with, obviously, the circumstances I mentioned before. And
so how do you know that the North Korean people are actually happy? Because I've always been told they're miserable.
Well, you have to start with where are the claims that they're miserable coming from, and you have to start with why is it that yeah, exactly. And then what I find intriguing is that there's defectors who were promised by human traffickers and basically people who, for a living, they smuggle people through the border. This is what's interesting. This is very overlooked. A lot of the times, they're duped to basically be brought over the border, and they're told, oh yeah, life in the South, it's perfect. Yeah, everything is abundant. It's total luxury. It's much better. All the problems that you face are gone and eliminated. Then they find themselves in the South. They find themselves in debt. They find themselves grossly alienated, totally with no kind of communal values, no extended family system, support system that's so fundamental to them. A lot of pornography, a lot of kind of drugs, a lot of a huge American presence that they were raised to find distasteful, I guess. And then you find out that some of these defectors, and you can look this up, I'm not making it up, some of them genuinely say, yeah, I was tricked. Life was better in the North. We were happier in the North. And as a matter of fact, if I wasn't going to be punished for it, if I had returned, I would like to return. So some of these people actually want to return back to the North after getting a taste of what the South is.
Well, can
but
they?
You know what? Sorry?
Can they?
Well, I probably not. You know, my best guess would be no, because if they crossed it illegally and if they're trying to re-enter, they would probably be suspected of being a spy or something, you know?
Doesn't sound great.
They'd probably have a hard time. But again, it needs to be highly emphasized. This is not just a difference of, you know, which societies would you prefer to live in? It's more of a question of sovereignty. You know, what right did the U.S. have to go into Korea and force an occupation on them and force a dictatorship on them that they didn't want? During the time of the U.S. occupation in the South, over 60% of people wanted the U.S. to just immediately leave. There were so many major uprisings that were brutally repressed that spontaneously happened because they wanted to overthrow that dictatorship in the U.S. presence. And for better or for worse, Kim Il-sung was the most popular man in Korea at the time, in both the North and the South. And again, in the North, the Soviet troops packed up their things and left. They didn't need to be there. They weren't there occupying it or nothing.
Wasn't China in some conflict with, I know they were with us with Korea, but did they have a conflict with Russia over Korea?
Yeah, actually, yeah. It's interesting you point out that, because the Soviet Union wanted a completely non-confrontational stance in Korea. They did not want to beef with the U.S. about Korea. They really didn't want any kind of war to happen that they'd have to be dragged into. That would have been a nightmare for them in their mind. So that was also part of the reason why they were so willing to just pack their things up and leave. The Chinese were not there, but at the outset of the war and the intense fighting, that's when the Chinese decided to come and back up Korea, because they perceived, and I think they were correct about this, the overall ambitions in Asia, starting in Korea, ended in China as well. They wanted to use it as a launching pad to undermine China's sovereignty. So that's kind of why they made that decision.
So it's still.
I don't know if I'm booking my next vacation there. I'm going to be honest.
So. What about?
I like to emphasize it. It's a country that views itself at war, and you know.
Yeah, I
don't really think
too. I believe you. Look, the evil crap that the country I live in does, just based on the problems it actually created so it could do that, it's pretty bad. So imagine you lived in a country run by one family, and you're right, you have the United States to fear. I imagine it'd be a lot of abuses of my individual rights in that country, and I don't mean like not caring about family, because it turns out lots of people care about their family. I mean something that would make you desperate enough to go, oh, I can get 800. You know, if it's so great to take $1 million to get the hell out and sneak out, you shouldn't have coyotes to get out of your own country. They're supposed to sneak you into a country.
Think about it. If you need to bribe people with $1 million to leave their country, the incentive to just pack your things up and go probably isn't that strong to begin with. I think that every society has, you know, criminals, has people at odds with society. They just can't adjust. They can't fit in. We have criminals here. There's criminals in the South. There's criminals everywhere in the world. If you're a criminal in the DPRK, you know, you're highly incentivized to cross the border instead of getting caught and sentenced for your crime. 3
generations of your family, is it not? Is that not true?
Well, what's the source? We have to look at the primary sources.
The Great Leader's book, Kim Il-sung. The guy that defected. There's a great documentary about the guy that defected, because a bunch of people have defected from America. You know, the mind control craze of the 50s or whatever after the Korean War. Some troops defected to North Korea, and they claimed that the United States was using bioweapons on these people, and so obviously they were under mind control. And that's why they were saying these crazy things. So that's why we had all that Manchurian Candidate stuff. I don't doubt any of the evil crap America did at all. I'm just saying, if I'm a guy, I wouldn't want to have that as a justification. I really don't care about national sovereignty if I got to live somewhere miserable. I don't. And I don't want to have to sneak around to watch what I want and do what I want, you know?
But I think that's not...
Asia.
Yeah.
They all just do things secretly.
I think your view is your own, and you know that's perfectly understandable, but it's not a perspective on life that's shared with everyone in the world. And I think there's many Americans who probably disagree with that. Our slogan was what for 1776? It was liberty or death. It wasn't even liberty or, we're going to go through some hardships and it's not going to be a cakewalk. It's liberty or death. So if you're willing to die to have sovereignty, to have your freedom as a country and not be under, the occupation of colonialism, I think it's understandable that the Koreans in the North are willing to go through and endure a great deal of hardship, at least compared to what they would otherwise be dealing with, to maintain their rights and their sovereignty, and I think I was born and raised in the U.S. I was raised with the story of 1776 and the founding values of this country. So to me, that was very understandable from that angle.
Where are you from?
What state? Michigan.
Oh, really? You're born in Michigan?
Yeah.
What city?
Metro Detroit area.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That is, I was. You're
allowed to leave Detroit.
I didn't.
Well,
know.
Yeah.
That.
Thank God for that.
And do you speak other languages?
No.
Really? You really are an American.
I can kind of understand a little bit of Arabic, and I can speak a little bit of it, like very basic, hi, bye, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But fluently, no.
Okay, and you and Jackson are doing a show, right?
Yeah, actually, me and Jackson are doing a show in 2 days, actually, on Friday. It's going to be in Dearborn, and, if you want to get tickets, it's going to be infrared.gg/events. We still have some for that, but yeah,
you're kidding. There's tickets are still available for that event?
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I'm honestly, I'm shocked because G. Jackson's very popular, so are you.
Yeah. No, we have some, not too many, but there's some.
Are you doing 2 shows or 1?
We're doing 1. It's our first show, so we're doing 1.
Okay. Are you?
But there's sorry?
Are you videotaping it?
Yeah, we'll probably videotape it, not live stream it though.
Okay. You should definitely videotape it. 3 cameras. Who else is on the show? You, Jackson, anybody else?
I don't know if you know them. They're the Midwestern Marks crowd. The Eddie Liger from TikTok, Carlos Noah, Danny Shaw. I don't know if you've had him on.
I know Danny Shaw. I've had him on.
Yeah, he's coming as well. Talk about his experiences. Yeah, our show is actually, speaking of 1776, our show is called Free America to Free Palestine, because our whole thing is like, before we can talk about freeing Palestine, we actually need to free this country from its own kind of occupation, because the government doesn't represent the interests of the people.
No. Not in America. This is a democracy.
This is the biggest state in NATO.
Yeah, I always like to say this. I came back from Russia and I went to customs, right? And obviously they take your phone, they take everything, do it. I was kind of shocked though, because some lady was like, "Hey, give me your phones, and I'm gonna go in the back and go through your phone. Don't worry, I'm not gonna download anything." I said, wait a minute, you're just going to go back and look through my phones, like whatever you want, like even private stuff, whatever. She's like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, can I say no? And she's like, no. She takes my phone. She goes, but here's this brochure. And this brochure is going to tell you, you go on this website and these are all your rights. And then I'm like, oh, how nice. And then I was sitting down with the brochure and I thought to myself, I was like, this is a country that's just as authoritarian as any other country. There's just as much government control and monitoring as any other country. But we have a great advantage. Our country is themed as a free democracy. Right. It's like Disney Park. It's the theme. So they're going to take your phone and, go look through all your stuff in the back. But while you're waiting for them, while they're doing that, you get a nice brochure to tell you about all the rights you have. And stuff.
I said this to Malice. I'm like, they're going to make us in North Korea. That's what a 15-minute city is. You just stay where you are. You need to go travel too far.
Yeah,
they admire the shit out of North Korea.
Well, they're
going to make us that.
So that's the thing, right? So they make they make it so I've tried to explain to people, we live in a surveillance state. You have no rights. You have no privacy. The government can throw you in jail, indefinite detention. All they have to do is say you're a terrorist. So anybody who actually stands up against the establishment, whether you're powerless like the Uhurus or the Stop Cop City protesters, or you're powerful like Donald Trump and his MAGA political movement. So you can't step out of line. And look what they're doing to the most decorated journalist of my generation, which is Julian Assange. And he he's being tortured in a prison right now for telling the truth. And the reason why other journalists aren't being tortured in prisons is because they ain't willing to tell the goddamn truth. That's why. Because they all go along. You get a $35 million contract at MSNBC like Rachel Maddow for being a willing tool of the war machine, which is what she is. Same thing with Sean Hannity. Same thing with Anderson Cooper. Okay? And you get fired if you tell the truth about the war machine or the establishment, which is what happened to Tucker Carlson, right? Again, so you get rewarded for lying. And so this idea that you live in a free country is just an idea. It's not real. You don't live. What America is the world's largest penal colony, right? We imprison more people than China in raw numbers. So this idea that we live in a free country, you don't live in a free country. You don't even live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy, right? And so it might seem on the surface a little better than North Korea, but you probably have just as few rights as they do there.
I mean, I have no doubt that this is a way more luxurious country than probably overwhelmingly most of the world. To say nothing of North Korea, far more luxurious. But, I think about the topic of happiness. And, to me, it seems to make more sense that real happiness is when life makes sense to you. Real happiness is when you actually have, a pattern and a way of life compatible with other people around you, a support system, social support system of families, villages, and communities where you have a place and you have a belonging to some kind of, to some kind of context, to some kind of society in some way. You can contribute to the culture. You can be part of a culture. I think a huge source of the unhappiness we see in the West and in South Korea, which, by the way, their suicide rates, including in Japan, it's pretty high, and, some data I've seen, I don't know how they're getting it exactly, but it's way higher than the North. And I think a lot of that's because of the alienation. People are just cut off from any kind of community and any kind of way of life that's just compatible with their existence. They're constantly being pushed on edge, being completely stressed out, being, overwhelmed with their dopamine receptors, with all this kind of, targeted mass media. I mean, I think it's an important point. It's like, in a totalitarian society, all you're thrown at is the regime propaganda to brainwash you. And I'm like, how much ads are thrown our way?
Right.
100%.
At every level of life, that's completely unavoidable. Well, those are just, people in the free market giving you ads. And I'm like, really? Because I look up that company and who owns that company. It turns out it's probably like 5 conglomerates or something that own the whole damn thing. And I'm pretty sure those people are not just doing
and
this
they
stuff
control
for
the
economic.
government.
That's why we have ad blocker.
Exactly.
And those same people control the government. I mean, Bill Maher is on a book tour now, and he's going in conservative media, and he's finding out just how propagandized he is. He thought Hillary Clinton never denied the election. He thought that January 6th they killed cops. He thinks the border. He has so many crazy ideas, and of course he thinks the problem in Gaza started on October 7th, and he thinks the problem in Ukraine started with Putin's invasion of the Donbass. He doesn't know anything. He's completely. He should be the poster child for American propaganda and how well it works, because that's what this media tour is turning out to be for him. But
we didn't want to poison his mind. See, I don't look at it as North Korea good. I look at it as we do that. I don't want to be, Canada now. They can go back to things you said in the past. They have the 3 generations rule now.
The way I see it is a people should have the right, as a people, to decide their fate. We shouldn't be going up to some other country saying, no, you can't have this.
I agree. But I'm telling you, as soon as the thing where somebody's on lockdown.
I don't think we should model America after Korea or China or any other country.
Do you understand what Korea is? It's a real big, like, that. Christianity took off real big there because it's a real dad worship kind of place. So, for example, South Korea, in the north, you got the one family. South Korea, it's Samsung. I can't remember the other company.
They're all oligarchs. They're all major elite.
It's like a mini version. It's actually kind of interesting. But the Moonies, that right-wing church that the CIA posted up, they went in and pushed into Japan. That's why that president got shot.
Oh, okay.
But that guy that made a wooden gun like that movie and killed the ex-president, that was because his parents' lives got ruined by Moonies.
Oh.
And anyway, there is a cultural thing to go into that. I just, I got no praise for anybody giving me, I'm being censored or what I can look at as censored, beyond obvious common sense things.
Yeah.
I don't want information censored because it's dangerous to the regime. We have that here. That's the thing we were criticizing North Korea
That's
about,
right.
wasn't it?
Well, it's
security. I really don't give a god. I don't care about the security of the prison I'm in. I really don't.
That's right.
And if it looks bad for the leader and that could hurt us because we have a bigger enemy, America's doing the same excuses as North Korea.
Look, what you're saying makes a lot of sense for us as Americans, especially when we're being pitted up against a government that's actively trying to poison us and destroy us at every level. But also, it's a part of our American culture, right? We don't treat speech the way that Eastern societies do. For us, words and they don't see. This is something I think it was some Czechoslovak dissident that said this during the Cold War. He was like, look, in our societies, there's more overt censorship. Like, there's things we're not allowed to say. But the reason for that is because the things we say actually have a direct impact on politics. Our words are treated as powerful. Our pen is treated as powerful. That's an a priori. People's voice matters. So that's why it has to be suppressed sometimes and whatever. But compare that to the West.
That's why we need guns.
We're allowed to say what we want, but it has no impact. It may have a small impact on some levels, but it doesn't have a direct impact to the point where, it's going to cause a crisis and a panic in the leadership directly.
Well, it has. I watched it.
Well,
it's increasingly becoming that way because I think Americans are waking up. Yeah.
Well, now that people actually do have social media platforms to say things, now you're seeing censorship happen because what they're saying actually does have an impact.
No, you're right. You're right.
So
but I'm saying he was talking about during the Cold War.
Right, I know. I got you.
Bush era, right? Where people didn't give a damn. They're just watching MTV.
What we've said here and what we will continue to say is that communism and capitalism end up in the same place. And here we are ending up in the same place. No choice. You got two companies that make planes. One of them is horrible, so you don't have any choice. And we don't have any freedom of speech. You have it controlled by a handful of oligarchs. And you got the government controlled by those same people. So we live in a surveillance state. It's very close.
The Yakov-Smirnov routine from the 80s.
That's right. We're living in the Yakovs, but we're told we have freedom. It's all lip service. They pay fealty to it, as Chris Hedges talked about.
Get a helmet to put
but we
on.
don't really live in it. But Haas, I have to move on. I wish we could talk about this all day long. We'll have to have you back on, and we'll talk about MAGA communism. And I appreciate you making yourself available. Everybody, check out their live show this Friday in Dearborn, Michigan. And everybody, check out your YouTube show where you're not allowed to say things that you'd like to say. We don't have freedom of speech on YouTube, that's for sure. I'm already banned from TikTok. Anyway, and of course,
thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Okay, it's great to have you. Sorry to cut this conversation short. We'll have you back on, and good luck this weekend, pal.
Thank you.
Okay, over to Steph.
Okay, great. All right. So say it again. So we're gonna go to a card, and we'll be right back with Jose Vega.
Let's make themselves. They found a rabbi hole, tunnels and all. There's Jews in the walls. Isn't it bliss? The rabbinical grace soiling the mattresses. Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
At this time, more than any other time, revolution is necessary. It is necessary. Not only based on what has happened with the MOVE organization, the babies that have been murdered, MOVE adults that have been murdered, bombs being dropped on us, but past that to what is happening with all black people, so-called minority people, money poor people. This government, as has been said earlier, has waged war on us. But something about us, particularly here in America, we don't really understand that. We don't really know what war is, for black people, for poor people, that people see as good, that they wasn't forced to do, that they didn't do to try to keep black people appeased, and calm down so that black people wouldn't riot. A prison situation is a crystallized example of that. You can make phone calls in prison. They have movies in prison, but they don't have those things because they just want to be nice to prisoners. They have those things because they know damn well if they don't have, people being able to contact their family, if they don't have, facilities for people to sit there and watch movies, people are going to be frustrated, upset, and they're going to direct that frustration at them prison administrators, and they're going to have riots on their hands. They're going to have people in them prisons turning them prisons out. That's why they have movies. That's why they have access to phones the way they do. And a stop to it when we don't like it, or encouraging it when it's something that's in our interest. We have to call the shots. The people have to take the reins of this system and start dictating what we need, what needs to be done. And, taking the initiative to do it ourselves. We can't rely on this system. Don't people see what's happening? Every single confrontation that MOVE people have been involved in, every single issue, oppression, economic issues, every single issue facing our people, is something that can be dealt with very, very simply. All people got to do is make their wishes known. All people have to do is stand up and say, listen, we're not accepting that. Unity is the key. Unity is the key to revolution. Revolution ain't nothing to be afraid of. It ain't nothing to shy away from. Revolution, contrary to what officials, this system and those backing the officials running this system, want people to believe that revolution means violence, means blood in the street. I'm saying it can get to that point, but it don't have to be violent. When people come together and take a strong stand on an issue, this government don't have no choice but to listen. Where you think they get their authority from? They don't have no power, but they do have authority to do certain things. Where do you think they get it from? They get it from us, from the people. They get it from us accepting the things that they do to be done to stop it. Then you have some people who want to then turn around and say, yeah, well, you know, it's the best we have, and want to make excuses. The time for excuses is over. It's over. You know, every man, woman, and child has to be involved in this revolution. Not only has to be, but is, whether you want to be or not. I mean, our babies gave their lives for this revolution on May 13th. You know, men, women, and children were murdered. And not just move babies, you know. What about all of the young men, women, you know, children 8, 9 years old shot down on the street by cops, you know, by drug pushers? I mean, you know, where do you think that mentality comes from? It comes from this system, from the mentality of this system of getting over, you know, making a quick buck, you know. I'm saying that's where that needs to be done to stop it. Then, you know, what I want people to really, really understand is that it's past time. It is past time for poor people, black people, you know, to realize that this system has failed you. It has failed you. You can't get nothing from it. And what people got to do is withdraw our support from it and start doing for ourselves. That's what we got to do. You know, how long are people going to sit back and beg, you know, this government to do what's right when for hundreds of years all you've gotten is a slap in the face? All you've gotten is this government kicking your ass. That's all. That's all black people have ever gotten from this government.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit